Hello! So we're back again, episode 2 of Period, the podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Anya.
And this is Mel Newton. Hi. And she's here from the Super Project. So, Mel, first things first, what is it that you and the Super Project do?
So the Super Project was set up to provide reusable menstrual products to support people in the UK living in period poverty. Because after doing a bit of research, I realised that particularly after COVID, there was a real issue with period poverty in the UK, but there weren't really many reusable projects going on. And to me, reusable menstrual products seem like the really obvious solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of food banks and stuff that are doing great work giving out disposables. But that's kind of like putting a plaster on the wound. Mm-hmm. It's not sorting out the problem because they just have to go back month after month after month. So I was like, well, if we get people reusables, then they'd just be sorted and problem solved. But obviously people that are experiencing period poverty can't afford those high upfront costs that come with reusables. So we wanted to be able to bridge that gap.
That's incredible, and that makes a lot of sense. That phrase that you use, plaster on the wound, I think that's something really important that you have to think about when acknowledging period poverty as a whole, because access in itself is one issue, and sorting that out, and like you said, putting a plaster on that wound is another kind of kettle of fish to the infrastructural problems that mean that we don't really have some all-cure panache to this problem.
Yeah.
But I suppose we'll delve deeper into that in the episode. So, talk to us a little bit about the kind of people that you've been working with over your experience in the Super Project.
So it's really interesting that we sort of meet people from all walks of life. So in terms of distributing our pads, so essentially how it works at the Super Project is we have a load of volunteers that make reusable pads at home for us. And then we sell them on a buy one, give one scheme. So for every one we sell, we donate one to someone living in period poverty. And the way we donate is we distribute them out to places like local food banks or places that work with vulnerable people. So we donate to a variety of different groups so that we can sort of target the people that are living in period poverty without being directly are you in period poverty? Because people don't want to admit to it, people don't want to talk about it. But in my experience, if you're accessing a food bank, you are probably also in period poverty, you're just not going to say it. So we work with all sorts of walks of life. We've donated to all sorts of people. We go to a lot of events and talk to different people, and it's always really interesting the conversations I have. People are always so willing to tell me all about their periods, which I think surprises people. People think that you do get the odd person that's oh, periods, but most people it's it just falls out of their mouths. They're so desperate to because someone said it's okay to talk about this, and then they're telling me their entire life story. Which is really nice. I mean, we've had instances where we've had dads come in to see us and be I'm a single father and I don't know how to talk to my daughter about menstruation, can you help me? And things like that. So it always surprises you who you speak to and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, because one of our reasons for starting the podcast was to sort of destigmatise periods, as we do think there is a problem around that, but that's really insightful and lovely to hear about all the people coming to talk to you.
I think when you mentioned about fathers, that's really beautiful, because period poverty has all kinds of niches to it, and I think in terms of education and period poverty, that's a whole barrel of fish, and especially in men. And I think it's lovely that someone's using your services to then educate themselves to help their family. I think that's so nice. But it's incredible.
And it's always interesting for me seeing the age differences and things. So for my parents' generation, for example, it wasn't really talked about. A lot of people didn't have any education on their periods, so they started their periods and thought they were dying. Whereas I'm now speaking to younger people, I'm only 31, but when I was in school, it was like, here's a pad, here's a tampon, the end. Whereas I'm speaking to young people now, and, you know, they have a much better knowledge about menstruation. I've had people come up to me and be like, yeah, I've always used reusables. And I'm like, wow, what? That's amazing. You know, so we are seeing those slow changes, and we are seeing more parents want to be actively involved in supporting their kids through menstruation. So it's really nice seeing that sort of generational shift.
Yeah. I know you talked about reusable products. Was it a no-brainer for the Super Project to, you know, go straight to using reusable menstrual products, or did you have a bit of time when you were like, you know what, maybe we should not go down the reusable route, or was it sort of
so it was always kind of the plan. So like the Super Project has a bit of like an interesting origin story.
Oh, do tell.
In that so my mum runs a non-profit organisation called Tiger Community Enterprise, and they do a lot of like sustainable things. They do sewing classes and all sorts of things. So she used to get a lot in sewing classes, people asking, can you teach me how to make reusable menstrual products? And she was like, let me go away, figure out a design, and I'll come back to you. So she designed her own menstrual pad. And then COVID happened, at which point I just finished my master's in business, literally graduated COVID pandemic, great times. So my mum offered to help the For Love of Scrubs group, and then eventually we ended up taking it over because they had so many volunteers, like they couldn't, the few volunteers that were running it couldn't cope, and they needed an organisation to take it over. So we had like 1,700 volunteers across Nottingham making like scrubs, laundry bags, headbands, all sorts for the NHS. And I sort of came on board to like manage the logistics of all that. So I was like managing drivers and stuff like that. And that sort of accidentally became my full-time job. Cut to like 18 months later, and we'd distributed something like 33,000 items for the Nottingham NHS. Wow. And then that kind of came to a natural end as like, you know, life went back to normal post-COVID. But we still had like a small handful of sewers that were like retired seamstresses and stuff that basically were like, well, it's something to do, and we really enjoyed like making for the community and having that sense of purpose, like could we do something else now? So me with my like academic head on was like, okay, let me go do some research and I'll figure something out. And we already had these menstrual pads designed, so I was like, this could be an interesting one, let me go away, do a bit of thinking and a bit of research and see what we come back with. So I did that, and I was just absolutely blown away to find out like the levels of period poverty in the UK, but the fact that it'd been so exacerbated by COVID. And I was like, this is it, this is the one, this is what we're going to do. And that's when I set up the Super Project as part of Tiger. It's like the first project I'd like run on my own and stuff. And then it's been a weird journey since then, because I kind of accidentally found my passion and I was like, this is my thing, this is what I want to do forever now. So I then have started my doctorate in social practice, but my doctorate is on basically the social constructions of menstruation and how that impacts an individual's lived experience of menstruation. So I'm currently working on that as well. So I basically just eat, sleep and breathe, period. Like, I'm either doing my doctorate or I'm doing the Super Project. So, yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. I'd love to talk a bit more about your doctorate as well.
Yeah.
But quick question first. You were speaking about all the different people that came to you. And I wanted to know, what is the biggest barrier? You spoke a bit about stigma. Is that kind of the biggest thing that is an issue when people come and speak to you or come to the Super Project looking for help? Is it stigma? Is it finances? What is the biggest problem that prevents them from having access? Is it infrastructure?
I think in terms of access, it's financial, particularly when it comes to reusables. because there is that much higher upfront cost. And, you know, I've done some like market research about what's out there. And, you know, I found period pants online that are like £60 for one pair of pants. I'm like, that's outrageous.
That's shocking.
You know. But then the seamstress in me is like, let me look at like the fabrics and stuff. And some of them like this is exactly the same makeup as the £20 pair of pants. So it doesn't always, like, more expensive doesn't always mean better quality. So yeah, there is that access. I think there's also like the skill element as well. Okay. So disposables are a relatively new invention. Yeah. Like, they only came around in like the late 1800s. Prior to that, people made their own, but they also had the skills available to sit and sew and make their own at home. Whereas we don't necessarily have those skills now in the same way that they used to. So people don't necessarily have the skills to figure out how to make their own if they can't afford disposables. So the whole sort of nature of the market has changed over time. To the point where we've become really dependent on disposables.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's importantly noted. Like, finances are a massive aspect. You said earlier that COVID had massively exacerbated the problem. Obviously, our focus of the social enterprise is women specifically in war-torn countries. So if we apply that back, we have a global pandemic affecting people in a relatively well-off area, relatively untouched by like conflict. And then if we then take that back to somewhere like in the Middle East, in rural areas of like Africa. We were talking to Ella Lambert in our last episode, who worked a lot in Africa, and it's quite like, if you think about those kind of factors as like numbers, for example, you have like a times 10 factor in Nottingham in the UK due to like COVID making it difficult for financial access, and there is some stigma, and there's that skill issue you're discussing, and then you take that back to somewhere like Africa, and you've got those plus cultural stigmas, plus like
civil conflicts.
Civil conflicts, and the access to those things. You know, suddenly you've got an issue that's considerably like, I can't personally fathom the difficulties and the hardship that these people must go through. And you've seen firsthand like part of that with the work that you're doing in the UK. And I think you've managed to educate yourself in a first-hand way that we would never be able to. And I suppose we should be really thankful for that.
Yeah. And I mean, I read that over 500 million women and girls worldwide suffer from some form of period poverty, which is just a statistic that I can't even begin to fathom. Like, it's crazy.
Something that like influenced my doctorate and the project that I came up with was thinking about the definition of period poverty, and it doesn't just include access, it includes education and knowledge and being free from stigma. So we do see it in different nuanced levels all over the world, and part of my doctorate project is this idea that, you know, somebody who, say for example, is a relatively well-educated white middle-class British person is going to have a vastly different experience of menstruation to someone, for example, living in rural India with like minimal education. They've got different access, so like disposables are again quite Western. There is kind of a push to get them more into different countries around the world, but it's still quite a Western concept. Like, should we be applying that Western concept to...
That's an interesting question to ask, especially as a reusable company, isn't it?
Is that a good idea? Are we just trying to create new markets? Is that what's actually in the best interest of people in those countries and in those cultures? It's how is the best way to support these people. So also the thing with reusables, and it's something that comes up a little bit occasionally with us, where one of the sort of the biggest groups experience period poverty is homeless people. But for most reusable, in fact all reusables, you need access to clean water and washing facilities, which if you're a homeless person, you don't necessarily have those opportunities. And you could apply that to like people in refugee camps and stuff. They have very limited access to water, washing facilities. So reusables won't necessarily be the answer. But even with disposables, do they have appropriate waste disposal for managing that? So I think in some countries in the world that don't have the waste systems like we have in the UK, it's still normal to like burn menstrual products. But disposable pads in the UK are like 90% plastic. Like, so if we were to take those products and take them to these countries and then burn them, like that creates toxins, and that's a health hazard in itself. So it's one of those where it's not an easy issue to answer.
Exactly.
There's no straightforward answer.
I completely agree. There's not really one size fits all solution here, is there? Because like you said, there are so many nuances, so many different levels to period poverty. And when you look at like crossing borders, those change. Crossing like county lines, different postcodes, suddenly you have a completely different situation at hand, and there's not like a solution to all of that because of that level of like both infrastructural and access issues that we have at hand here. I'd like to talk a bit more about your doctorate. I'm going to veer off from the brief a little bit because that sounds so fascinating. So it was infrastructural and social infrastructure and lived experiences, did you say?
So social constructions, which is probably a very watered down version of it, because I've gone quite philosophical on how we perceive those social constructions and not. It's very easy to, particularly in sociology, to be like, well, that's social and that's cultural and that's nature. But I don't think the real world works like that. All these elements are interplaying with each other. So I'm looking to start conducting my interviews in the summer. And we're going to do walking interviews. So we're just going to go for a walk in the park and I'm like, tell me your menstrual life story. And then from that, we're going to like pull out what is... these different social elements of it and how has it impacted someone's experience, because no two persons' menstrual experience are the same. And we can, you know, if you take for example the cost of tampons in the UK, we can predict that those prices going up is going to lead to higher levels of period poverty. But we can't say that's going to happen to everybody because everybody has slightly different circumstances, slightly different influences on their life, on their choices, different priorities when it comes to their spending. So we know, for example, that like mothers are more likely to forgo their own period products if it's a choice between that and feeding their kids or keeping the heating on, for example. So it's a much more complex system where you can't just predict what someone's menstrual experience is going to be. And I think the sort of aims have to be is how can we give people as much autonomy over their menstruation as possible? How can we make sure that they have all the education, all the access facilities to make the menstrual choices that are right for them? And that's not always going to be reusables. It'd be nice if they're accessible as possible so that people do have that option, but it's not going to work for everyone. And that's okay.
I think that's such an interesting way of like coming at it. When you say autonomy, I think people kind of see like this massive oppressive physical force, but it's social constructs that are preventing so many women all around the world, especially in the UK, from having autonomy over their period experiences, and that's an interesting perspective I hadn't thought to look at. So that's really fascinating.
So you spoke about obviously your whole company working with reusable pads. Can you tell us the composition of the pads and what they involve and how they're made?
So we try to really find the balance with our pads of making sure they're as eco-friendly as we can be, and we're picking materials that are not just good for the planet, but they're also good for your natural microbiome. You've got to be careful what you're putting down there. You know, one thing that isn't talked about enough when it comes to menstrual education and menstrual awareness is things like vaginal infections, and how we can prevent those. So man-made materials such as polyester, such as nylon, they're not very breathable, so they can be very suffocating. Which means that you're more at risk of infections and things like that. Which is why when you've got disposable pads that are 90% plastic, like, it can't be good. It's
not only are they awful for the environment, but for your body.
Yeah, exactly. So but we also wanted to get the balance that we wanted to make a product that could compete with disposables. We didn't want it to be lesser quality, so that meant that we made compromises in our design. And there are designs out there with other brands that are super eco-friendly and have no plastic in whatsoever.
But they'll cost more, won't they?
They don't necessarily cost more, but they kind of miss out on the functionality, so they're more likely to leak. And it's all about like making a personal choice. So if your priority number one is I want this to be the most environmentally friendly product there is, then absolutely like choose their products. But for us, we wanted to make sure we were maintaining functionality. So they're mostly cotton design. So we have like a brush cotton outer layer, so it's soft and gentle against your skin. But also brush cotton is really good at what we call moisture wicking, which means it's pulling that moisture away from your skin and you don't feel like you're sitting in it.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's interesting.
So if you whereas polyester brands aren't quite as good at that. So if you try like a polyester brand and then an all cotton brand, you can feel the difference. That like you feel a bit more like you're sitting in it, and that's not comfortable. You don't want that. And then it's made up of something called Zorb. And Zorb was a specially made material that was designed specifically and used for reusable nappies and reusable pads. And what it can do is it can absorb like, I think it's something like 10 times its weight in half a second or something like that, absorbative layer. And it's made up of, I think it's like a combination of materials. I think it's like cotton, bamboo, and maybe a tiny bit of polyester in it. And then we have a layer called pull. And pull you will see in pretty much all period pad brands. And it is part plastic. Imagine if you like attach cling film to fabric, that's kind of what pull is like.
Okay.
And what that layer does is it stops it coming out the other side. So that's your leak-proof layer, essentially. But it's at least not in sort of direct contact with the skin. That's almost like the layer that's on your pants. So a lot of brands, they have the pull as the back layer, which is why sometimes they feel a bit filmy on the back. We add another layer of cotton on top of that, but that's just preference to our design, and that's where we add like funky patterns in and stuff, because we love a funky fabric. Especially if the fabric happens to be some kind of period pun as well, we love that too.
What do you mean? Period puns?
Don't
get
get
my
started.
style.
We love a period
We've got
pun.
this one here. What does this one say?
Oh, we've got a cramp champ here.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's a cramp champ, and this is love you always. Period. Yeah. Period puns all the way.
So yeah, and then we have little snapper buttons, and that's how it attaches to your pants. So again, those you can buy those in metal, but we use plastic ones. But again, even though there is plastic in it, it's about functionality, and it's also we're still reducing what we're using compared to the level of plastic that's in a disposable. So I think sometimes with sustainability, there's this feeling that you have to be perfect all the time. And in the real world, you need balance. So yeah, we made some compromises in our design to make sure that we were creating a very functional product that worked for people. And our pads also work for incontinence as well. So we have like a massive size range that goes from like these really small panty liners up to these like huge pads that work for both incontinence and people experiencing like endometriosis where they have very heavy flows. Because 50% of women in the UK, postmenopausal women I should say, are incontinent. So it's kind of like this silent thing that nobody's talking about, but it's like estimated to cost, I think from NHS figures, like the average woman, postmenopausal woman, is spending like 34 to like £70 a month on incontinence pads.
Oh gosh.
So it's like this cost of products doesn't go away after your period stop. So making sure we could provide for both of those as well in our products was important to us.
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing that you said about, sustainability makes you feel like you have to be perfect. That's such an interesting point. I know from speaking to people, they're often always like, okay, but that solution isn't 100% perfect, why would I go for it? And that logical fallacy is really frustrating, because when you think about it, going for your products is probably like, what, 10 times better than the disposables they're currently using. That's still a massive step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And it's also beautiful and doing good in its own way, because that means it's accessible for more people that do prioritise functionality, because I reckon that is most women. Do you know what I mean? Flow's range.
And I think like with sustainable products as well, like they actually make my life easier. Like I do what I do for a living, but I also like track my periods and stuff. Like you would not believe how often I still get caught short, because periods love to be super unpredictable.
Oh yeah.
So like just knowing that they're just always there in the drawer. There's never a panicked run to like buy tampons or whatever, because I've always got like an array of things in my drawer that I can use. Because part of what I do as well, I do like reviews of products on the Super Project website. So I just I'm privileged enough to have a variety of menstrual products at home.
Yeah.
So it's convenient to just always have it there when you need it. And also, I'm a very lazy person. And if I can cope with washing my menstrual products, anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Like, if I can do it, anybody can. So, yeah. I think people think it's this huge endeavour to switch to reusables, but you'd be surprised at, like, how easy it is to do. And I find that, like, my periods are way much more comfortable now.
Yeah.
I'm less hyper aware of them, like, because, you know, I feel like with disposable products, you kind of always feel that they're there.
Yeah.
Like, you become very aware of them. And switching to reusable ones has just changed my whole experience with my own menstruation, which has been really interesting.
How long have you been using them yourself then?
Probably around the time I started the Super Project. I mean, even though like there were stuff around when I was a teenager, they weren't talked about in the same way.
Yeah.
I think I was probably in my 20s when like the whole like moon cup trend started, and that was kind of the real start of the shift towards reusables. But yeah, so it's interesting like looking back now on my experiences as a teenager to like my experiences now, and that sort of difference. But yeah, it's been a few years now, and I don't think I could ever go back.
Yeah. Well, it's comforting to know that you yourself are like so comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I know there's 101 companies out there that probably do similar things that might not necessarily also do the same thing as what they're preaching. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's incredible that it's changed your own life. Like the work you're doing has impacted you as well. That's so cool.
In terms of for young people, so people like us, what can we do to help the problem with period poverty, or what ways should we, what should we try to incorporate into our daily life to maybe reduce those problems, such as using reusable menstrual products?
I think the best thing people can do is talk about it. Talk about periods. Make it so normal to talk about periods, because silence is what drives stigma.
Yeah.
And when there's this huge stigma, people don't talk about it, and that's sort of how we've ended up in this situation where we've got like huge levels of period poverty and nobody's talking about it. So yeah, we need to be having these conversations. We need to make it so normal to be like, oh, babe, I'm having the worst cramps today. Like, I feel like I'm dying. And there's one thing I see online all the time is like, be period positive, and I'm like, yes, I love that. However, with the caveat that like being period positive doesn't mean you always have to love your period. Like, because there's days where it's awful, like, and I find it really surreal when I'm like working on my doctorate. Like, I had it a few weeks ago. I was in a supervisor meeting on Teams, and I was having like the worst period cramps, and I'm there with like my hot water bottle, like, don't mind me, keep going, like, it's fine, everything's fine. With like my male supervisor, and he's just like, okay. But yeah, just make it normal to just be open about it. Like, if you're having an off day, instead of being like, oh, I'm just feeling a bit under the weather, be like, I'm on my period.
Yeah, no.
I feel like that's something we really take for granted, being at all-girls school.
I was
That's something that we can talk about just so freely, and it's so natural. And I think it's so lovely for us.
Yeah.
But, like, it would be really great to see that across the country.
Yeah. We had some guest students at the school yesterday for a competition we were hosting, and I'm going to be period positive and say I'm on my period right now and it kills. I don't have a great experience with my periods. And I came back to some of the girls I just met and I was like, I just have the worst cramps. Like, I don't really know what to do. Like, we have to go on stage. And the girl she went to a mixed school and she was like, yeah, no, when I'm on my period and I'm having bad cramps, I'm still sneaking products up through my sleeve. And I'm telling my male teachers, like, oh, I just don't feel very well and I'm going back to my common room. And I thought, that's so strange, because we're so lucky to be able to come into our common room and just be like, oh, Anya, I literally feel like I'm dying. Like, I don't know what to do. Yeah. And there are so many women and girls that are like whispering, like, oh yeah, but can you got paracetamol? Yeah. And again, like Anya said, we're taking that for granted, and that's something that we should be, and I hope that we're like encouraging in our daily lives by talking about it a little bit more, just a little bit more.
Also, just being really generous and stuff, like, because I feel like when we talk about it, it's interesting, like, you could go into any women's bathroom anywhere and be like, has anyone got a tampon? And someone be like, got you, babe. Like, and it's so normal, and I think we should be like that open in all spaces. And I find in general men are quite curious, like, but they've been so shut out of it from like such a young age. But like, most of them want to help and be supportive, they just don't know how.
Yeah,
you know,
that's true. And people are willing to learn. I think that's something that
I mean, exactly. We've got a podcast and we've got people watching, so that shows that there's someone out there there's
some hope for the population.
Exactly. So following on from what Anya said about young people doing their bit, how do we avoid kind of that, like, because obviously with these situations you have to be sensitive. Like I said at the beginning, it's not like a case of, have you got period poverty, like, how can I help? That's not necessarily the respectful way to go about it. How do you avoid saviorism in a way, and kind of saviorism, like, how do you avoid that and make it that you're making sure that you're being like respectful of these people and the experiences that they're going through?
I think for me, again, it comes back to that, like, not being direct. So, you know, sometimes we do direct donations to people, and it's being sensitive, it's being discreet about it. So sometimes I can just pick up from things that people are saying. They don't have to tell me directly, like, I'm in period poverty. But, you know, there'll be things that they say that you can just tell they're struggling with it a bit. So I'm like, you know, oh, I can, like, give you some, like, samples of these pads or whatever, like, just to, like, help you out. And that usually goes down, like, pretty well. I think there's definitely a nuance to how we address it. And I think for me, it's how we talk about it as well. So with like my doctorate, like with this, like I'm happy to like come out and waffle about periods to anybody, and raising that awareness and raising the bigger issues, rather than coming out and be like, well, I've done this many donations and I saved this person. Like, it's having those wider conversations rather than, I suppose, like bragging about it. Yeah. And I think maybe it's also partly just as a woman, I'm so much more conscious about how I put myself out there as well, and how I don't come across as, you know, being braggy or arrogant. So
I know you just said that you don't come out and brag about things you don't. I mean, I think all of us can agree that the things that you've been doing are incredible and brag-worthy, but humbleness, which is incredible. But one thing I would like to ask, obviously anonymity is needed. Is there a particular story, a particular person that you've spoken with and interacted with that's really touched you? An experience?
I think, and I don't think she'll mind me saying this, is we had someone that helped me run the Super Project for a while, and she was really passionate, but she was a bit sceptical about sustainable pads at first, reusable pads. And she tried them, and then she was like, she was using our largest pad, and she was like bleeding through them in a couple of hours. And I was like, something's not right. Because I'd done tests with our like smallest pads where they could like pretty well take 20 mil of water, which is supposedly more than you have in your whole period.
Yeah.
So she like knew something was wrong. So she went to A&E. They had to like put her on some stuff to like stop the bleeding. Turns out she had endometriosis.
Oh my god.
And she talks about this like quite proudly of like, you know, without these pads, I never would have been taken seriously, because she could literally take that pad to A&E and be like, look at this. Like,
this
look
is
at
not
the
right.
state of this. This is not okay. Whereas, you know, I think as women in general, we really struggle to be taken seriously by like medical professionals and stuff. Like our pain isn't taken seriously. Like the average diagnosis time for endometriosis in the UK is like 7 years. So she really like credits our pads as being the thing that like helped her get her diagnosis and stuff. So I feel like that's the story that like really sticks with me, is that like we were able to do something so positive from that. That's one that really sticks with me. I think, and probably like the dad that I mentioned earlier as well, like that was just such a wonderful story, and the fact that he was willing to come out and be like, help me, and we were like, anything you need, what do you need, we'll help you.
That's so lovely. That story definitely touched me. But wow is all I have to say. I think the work that you're doing here, and especially so close to home, like we're in Nottingham, and knowing that something like this is happening like on our front doorstep is really comforting in a way. Like we've been reaching out to people from all across the world in like, you know, Zimbabwe. We've got a woman from Zimbabwe coming on soon, hopefully. Ella herself has been like to Morocco and things like that, and it's like it kind of, there's a distance to it, do you know what I mean? And we're sitting here in our like private school and we're like, oh, this is happening elsewhere, and then we have people like you that are literally just, you're working in town, for example, and knowing that kind of change is being implemented so close to home, makes the situation feel like far more real. Exactly, more real, and definitely I have way more hope than I did before. You know, there are people that help in those situations, but knowing that you're helping in like
our local area.
Exactly. It's just, it's life changing.
Because I think it's a thing where people hear the word period poverty and they think of like the developing world. They think of the global south, and I'm like, it's right here on our doorstep. And that's not to say that those other projects around the world aren't super valuable and super important. But for me, I'm like, this is happening right here in our own country in like 2026. This is outrageous.
In a high-income developed country, people are still suffering from period poverty.
Exactly.
That's where those infrastructural issues come in, isn't it? Like you said, the nuances, the steps. Like there are so many people actively trying to work in those countries, but in a way, I feel like you can't reach success there if you haven't gone through those steps everywhere else in the world. If you can't reach it in a country like this, it's going to make those issues 100 times harder everywhere else. But exactly.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's been really insightful and so amazing to hear about the work you've done.
And we hope your doctorate goes incredibly well.
Thank
that sounds
you.
so fascinating.
But, you should be so proud of the work you do, and maybe you should be a bit more big-headed.
I know. People tell me all the time I put myself out there more, and like... No,
absolutely incredible. And I think that is the mug that you're holding right now that we would love for you to go take home with you as a memory from today.
Keep it.
Of course.
Oh my goodness, yay.
Yes, but with the period pun on, obviously. Which, let me just add, the Super Project, that's a period pun, isn't it?
Well, it stands for the Sustainable Period Project, which I was super proud to come up with that. I was a bit like, I'm so clever. After I came up with that one.
Super, I noticed that and I was like, we need to get her on. Yes, thank you so much.
That's alright, thank you very much.
Lovely. 3, 2, 1.